Wyoming Territory, late June of 1878. The sun was falling low behind the Sweetwater Mountains when Nolan Ashford rode hard across the dry plains, dust rising behind his sorrel gelding like smoke from a dying fire. He saw the chapel before he saw the girl, small, whitewashed, empty. The town of Grady's Hollow had already started folding in on itself after the railroad plans shifted south, leaving behind boarded shops and a few stubborn souls. Nolan had not planned to stop. He was on his way to Fort Bridger for cattle work. But the sight of a woman in a torn wedding dress, seated on the chapel steps with her head in her hands, brought his horse to a halt without him even pulling the reins. She looked up when the hoofbeats stopped. Her eyes were red, her cheeks streaked with tears. But even through the mess of it all, lace snagged, veil askew, she was beautiful in a way that made Nolan forget the miles behind him. "You lost?" he asked, voice steady. She shook her head slowly. "No. I am exactly where I was left." He dismounted, boots crunching over dry weeds, and stepped closer. "You all right?" She laughed once, sharp and without humor. "Do I look all right?" He looked at her again. Her dress was dirtied and torn at the hem, her hands scraped like she had fallen. "No, ma'am. You look like you could use a hand." She looked away, jaw tight. "My name's Lydia Penrose, Nolan Ashford." They stood in silence for a moment. The wind stirred her veil and tugged at his coat. "I was supposed to be married today," she said finally, soft. "But he ran. Left this morning, took the horse and the money. Guess he figured I was not worth settling down for after all." Nolan's brow lowered. "That is cruel." "It is what it is." She tried to stand but winced and sat back down. "Twisted my ankle when I chased after him." "Fool thing to do." Nolan crouched in front of her. "Let me see." She hesitated, then lifted the edge of her dress. Her ankle was red and swollen. "I can help you up," he said. "There is a town about 3 miles back. Got a doctor or what passes for one. I am not going back there. Everybody saw what happened. I will not give them a show. I am not leaving you here. I do not need saving." "I did not say you did," he said, "but I am offering help, and I do not walk away from someone hurting." She looked at him long and hard, then gave a small nod. "Fine." He helped her up, careful with her ankle. She leaned on him, stiff at first, then let herself rest against his side. He smelled of trail, dust, and leather, and something deeper, safe, solid. He lifted her into the saddle and climbed up behind her. She tensed again, unused to the closeness. But the pain must have softened her pride because she leaned back just enough to steady herself. They rode into the deepening dusk, the plains turning gold and then gray beneath the wide Wyoming sky. She spoke again as the stars began to poke through. "I left everything for him. Family, home, even my last name. He said we would go west and start fresh." Nolan's jaw clenched. "He is a coward." Lydia looked down at her hands. "I have nowhere to go, nothing to my name but this dress." "You have a name," he said. "You have more than you think." She turned to look up at him, eyes shining in the moonlight. "Why are you helping me?" He held her gaze. "Because no woman should be left alone in a wedding dress with no place to go. Not while I am breathing." They reached an old line shack he had used once during a cattle drive last fall. It was not much wooden walls, a cot, a stove that needed coaxing, but it was shelter. He eased her down and carried her inside when she tried to walk. Set her gently on the cot. "I will fix a fire," he said, lighting the lamp. Lydia sat quiet, watching him move. He built warmth from nothing, smoked coffee and beans over a flame, gave her a blanket and the cleanest cup. No man had ever done so much for her without asking for something in return. She cleared her throat. "You said your name was Nolan." "Yes. You from around here, born in Texas. Been riding north a few years now. Work horses, cattle, not much else to say." She nodded. "You are kind." He looked at her straight. "You are strong." They sat in silence again, listening to the wind press against the walls. She looked down at the ring still on her finger, cheap, brass, already tarnished. She pulled it off and set it on the table. "I am done waiting on men who run." He reached over and took her hand. "I do not run," her breath caught. "You do not even know me." "I know enough. I know you are sitting here after everything and you are still standing. That tells me more than anything." Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears were different. "You do not have to say anything," he said. "But I will tell you this: if you let me, I would take care of you. Not because I pity you, Lydia, because I want to." She stared at him like she was trying to read something between his eyes. "You do not even know what I have been through." "I do not need to. I can see who you are now. And that is enough for me." Her lip trembled. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," he said gently, "you were left behind, but you are not alone. If you let me, I will be the man who stays. You can be my wife, Lydia. For real this time. No lies." She looked at him, tears slipping down her cheeks, and this time she did not look away. "You mean that?" "I do." She reached up and touched his face, thumb brushing along the rough line of his jaw. His hand covered hers, warm and sure. "I do not want to be alone anymore," she whispered. "You will never be," he said, and when he leaned forward, she met him halfway. Not out of desperation, but out of something new, something honest. The kiss was simple and sure, and it felt like the beginning of a life neither of them had dared want before. Outside, the wind settled. The night stretched quiet and long across the plains. Inside, two hearts finally rested. By morning, the wind had turned gentle, brushing through the grass like a lullaby. Nolan stepped outside the lined shack before first light, letting the door ease shut behind him. The sky was just starting to take on that pale, blue-gray hush before sunup, and he could hear the faint rustle of deer moving somewhere east. He checked the gelding, ran a hand along his neck, and fed him from the canvas bag tied to the saddle horn. Then he took the old tin pail and walked down to the narrow stream that cut behind the stand of cottonwoods. Snowmelt made the water sharp and clean. He filled the pail, his boots sinking into the soft edge of the bank, then turned back up the slope. His breath came out in faint clouds. When he stepped inside again, Lydia was sitting upright on the cot, blanket wrapped round her shoulders, eyes clear but heavy-lidded. She hadn't cried again, not once through the night, though he'd heard her breathing falter long after the fire burned low. She looked at him now like someone still trying to decide if the world would hold. "I heard you leave," she said, voice rough from sleep. "Just the stream," he said, setting the pail down. "Fire needs water if we want coffee." She gave a small nod and swung her legs over, testing her ankle. She didn't wince this time, but she didn't stand either. "I didn't sleep much," she said. "I figured." She rubbed her arms beneath the blanket. "I kept thinking about the way folks looked at me when it started falling apart. Like I'd done something shameful just by being left. You didn't. I know that in my head, but it doesn't sit right in my chest yet." He crouched by the stove, coaxing new flame from the embers. "Takes time." She watched him work in silence until the flames caught. Then she asked, "Have you ever lost something that made you question who you were?" He didn't speak right away. The fire crackled as he poured water into the blackened kettle. "My older brother died when I was 15, he said finally. "Fell from a horse out near the Brazos, broke his neck. He was the one folks said would make something of himself. My pa didn't say much after that, just handed me the reins and told me to work." Lydia's fingers tightened on the edge of the blanket. "That's a hard thing. Made me quiet for a long time. Still does, I guess." She looked at him, eyes softer now. "You carry it like a man who doesn't want to trouble anyone." He nodded once. "Trouble has a way of finding folks without being invited." They sat quiet while the kettle hissed and spit. When the coffee was ready, he poured them each a tin cup. They drank without speaking for a while. The warmth helped settle the morning chill. Lydia set her cup down. I need to find work. You don't need to do anything just yet. I do. I've got 2 hands and my pride. I'm not about to sit around while someone else shoulders my place in the world. He respected that. It showed in the way he looked at her steady, without any hint of pity. There's a woman runs a ranch about 20 miles north, he said. Widow, lost her boys to typhoid last winter. I done work for her once. She might take on someone dependable. Would she take on someone who left home with nothing but a name and a dress she can't wear anymore? She'd take on someone who shows up ready to work. That's what matters to her. Lydia nodded slowly. Then I'll go. His brow furrowed slightly. You don't have to rush off. I'm not rushing. I'm choosing. And if you're still serious about what you said last night, then let me prove I'm not just something broken you happened across. Nalan didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, then back at her. I meant every word. She stood, careful but steady, and walked the 2 steps between them. Her fingers brushed his sleeve. That means something to me, she said. More than I know how to say. You don't have to say it yet, he said. Just stay close a while. I will. He looked at her, then not just her face, but the way she held herself now. Not proud exactly, but sure. Like something inside her had started to knit back together in the quiet hours between night and morning. I'll ride with you, he said. To the widow's place, all right. And when you're ready, he added, we'll make a home, not because you need saving, because we'll build it together. She didn't cry this time. She just stepped in and rested her forehead against his chest. He folded his arms around her like he'd always meant to. The sun broke fully over the plains, spilling warmth across the floorboards. Outside, the gelding pawed at the dirt, ready for the trail ahead. Inside, 2 hearts stood steady, not just surviving, beginning. The widow's ranch sat low in a shallow valley, wrapped in cottonwood and chokecherry. The wind slower there, like it respected the weight of what had been lost. 3 long days of riding had taken them north. Lydia's ankle steady enough now for saddle time, with breaks under shade, and Nalan walking stretches to ease the strain on her leg. The land changed as they moved, less dust, more green, though still spare, and when they reached the split-rail gate, Lydia sat straighter in the saddle. Nalan dismounted and unlatched the gate, pushing it open with a low creak. The house ahead was made of pine logs, the wood gone soft gray. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, and the barn stood tall behind it, roof patched with tin. Chickens scattered as they passed, and a dog trotted up, tail high, sniffing Nalan's boots before circling Lydia's horse with a whine. "You've been here before?" Lydia asked, watching the dog settle on the porch. "Last fall," Nalan said. "Brought in a young colt for breaking." Before she could ask more, the door opened and a woman stepped out. She wore men's trousers tucked into boots, a calico shirt rolled to the elbows, and her dark hair was braided down her back. Her face was lined deep at the corners, but her eyes were sharp as prairie light. "Nalan Ashford," she said, arms folded. "Didn't expect you to ride in again." "Morning, Mrs. Dahl," Nalan said. "Brought someone who's looking for work." Mrs. Dahl looked Lydia over, taking in the dress she now wore, plain cotton, borrowed from Nalan's pack, her trimmed hair, her steady seat. "You handle yourself on a horse." "I can," Lydia said. "And I learn quick." "She's not looking for charity," Nalan added. "Good," Mrs. Dahl said. "I don't give it." Lydia dismounted herself, wincing only slightly as she landed. She stepped forward, extending her hand. "Lydia Penrose," Mrs. Dahl shook it. "Kitchen's short a hand since spring." "You cook?" "I can skin a rabbit and bake without burning the crust." "Then you've got a place if you're not afraid of waking before dawn." "I'm not," Lydia said. Mrs. Dahl nodded once. "Well enough. There's a spare room behind the kitchen." As Lydia followed the older woman inside, Nolan stayed by the fence, watching. He didn't call after her or offer to help unpack her things. There were none. Instead, he leaned on the rail and looked toward the hills, the weight in his chest doing something he hadn't expected. It eased. Later, after the sun had dropped and the scent of cornbread drifted through the window slats, Lydia stepped outside. She found Nolan sitting on the porch steps, sleeves rolled, shirt open at the throat, elbows resting on his knees. "I've been thinking," she said, easing down beside him. "It's strange how fast the world can shift. One moment you think you know your path, and then a different road shows up, quiet as a breath." He glanced at her, the side of his mouth lifting just slightly. "You regret riding that new road?" "No," she said. "But I think I'm still learning how to walk on it. You've done more than most would." She tilted her head, watching the horizon. "Do you believe people are meant for certain places, certain lives? I think some folks find each other when they're meant to. Doesn't always come easy. But when it does, you hold on." She looked down, fingers tracing the wood grain beside her. "I don't know what being someone's wife really means. I thought I did before, but that was just a picture someone else painted." "It's not a picture," he said. "It's building something that lasts, even when the weather turns. I don't want to be something you rescue. I never did see you that way." She turned to him, her face open in a way it hadn't been before. "Then if we build something, it'll be with both our hands." "Good," he said. "Because I've got no use for anything less." She leaned her shoulder against his, quiet settling between them like a blanket freshly shaken and warm. The stars were coming out above them, slow and sure. Inside, a lantern glowed in the window. "I'll stay here through the season," she said. "And then we'll plan." His hand found hers, rough palm against her smooth one. "We'll plan together." She nodded, her grip firm around his fingers. The dogs stretched out at their feet, tail thumping once. There was no need for more words. The promise had already been made, not in vows or ink, but in the way they moved beside each other, steady and without fear. Whatever came next, they'd meet it side by side. By mid-August, the air had a thinner edge to it, the kind that whispered of the coming shift in season. The widow's ranch moved with its own rhythm, early light, steady hands, long days. Lydia rose before first light most mornings, her apron already tied as she stepped into the quiet kitchen to begin bread or peel potatoes, depending on where the day was headed. She learned the shape of the place fast, where the floor creaked near the stove, the way the back door stuck in the heat, how the dog would pace the porch before rain. Nolan kept to the bunkhouse for decency's sake, though the space between them never stretched far. He took work on nearby drives. Small herds moved from ranch to railhead, always back before dark. He never said much about the riders he worked with, but Lydia knew he carried their respect. She saw it in the way they nodded when they passed him, gave room when he spoke. Late one afternoon, she found him by the barn, mending a saddle strap with his sleeves rolled and his hat set aside. She crossed the yard with a pail of milk and dirt on her skirt, stopping a few feet from him. "I've been thinking," she said, brushing her hands on her apron. "About winter." He didn't look up right away, just kept threading the needle through the cracked leather. "There's a few options," he said. "We could ride south, find a small place near Medicine Bow, or north if you're wanting more quiet." "I was thinking, maybe we don't go yet." He set the leather aside and looked at her. "You wanting to stay on for a while," she said. "There's something about this place, the way it holds its quiet without feeling empty." He nodded once. "You've taken to it." "I didn't expect to," she admitted. "But it's good work, and there's a steadiness here. That's new to me." His eyes held hers, steady as always. "You don't have to explain yourself, Lydia. If this feels right, we'll shape our plans around it." She swallowed, then stepped closer. "It does feel right." And I've been thinking about something else, too. He stood now, the strap forgotten. Tell me. I want to marry you before the frost sets in. He blinked once, not in surprise, but as if the words had settled into him deep and slow. You sure? I've never been more. He reached for her then, his hand warm against her wrist. Then we will, quietly but proper. I don't need much, just you and a day that's ours. He looked toward the hills, then back to her. Reverend Morgan still rides circuit through the valley. He'll be by in 2 weeks' time. She smiled, the kind that lifted only one side of her mouth, but it reached her eyes. That sounds about right. They stood in the barn's shadow a few minutes longer, the sun slanting low behind them. He brushed a thumb across her knuckles, and she didn't pull away. That night, Mrs. Dahl found Lydia folding linens near the back steps. She leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. You're settling in, she said. Lydia folded the last sheet before answering. I think I found something worth staying for. Mrs. Dahl didn't smile, but her voice softened. You've done good work here, earned your place. I'm grateful for it. You planning on leaving come spring? Lydia hesitated. Depends. We're to be married soon. Mrs. Dahl nodded once. You're not the same woman who walked through my gate. No, Lydia said. I'm not. That's a good thing. Later, Nalin found her watching the stars from the back stoop, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. He sat beside her, silent for a stretch, then reached into his coat and handed her something wrapped in linen. She unfolded it slowly. Inside was a ring, simple silver, with a single carnelian stone set flush into the band. It was my mother's, he said. She wore it out on the land, doing all the same things you do now. Lydia ran her thumb over the smooth edge of the stone. It's beautiful. It's yours if you'll wear it. She held it a moment longer before slipping it onto her finger. It fit without resistance. I will, she said. He didn't kiss her then. He just sat beside her, their shoulders touching, the silence between them full of what they knew without needing to name. The stars kept climbing, and the night held them close. The sun stood low over the valley when Reverend Morgan arrived by horse, dust clinging to the hem of his coat and his Bible tucked in a leather satchel. He was a tall man with a weathered face and a voice that carried without effort. Mrs. Dahl offered her parlor, and Nalin cleared the space that morning, moving the settee against the wall and brushing the hearth clean with an old willow broom. Lydia laid out fresh linens and a small jar of wild asters from the edge of the creek. They had no guests, only Mrs. Dahl and the ranch hand Tom, who had worked the hay field with Nalin that past week. No lace, no music, just the hush of late afternoon and the sound of the wind pressing through the eaves. Lydia wore a pale blue dress that Mrs. Dahl had sewn from bolt cloth tucked away in a cedar chest. The neckline was modest, the sleeves fitted, and the skirt hung just right. Her hair was braided and pinned back with care, and she wore Nalin's mother's ring on her finger already, as was custom when the engagement had no long courtship. When the words were spoken, Nalin's voice was low but sure. Lydia's hand didn't shake when she took his. They looked at each other like they'd never known anything else, and maybe they hadn't, not in the way that mattered. After the vows, Mrs. Dahl poured strong coffee and cut slices of dried apple pie. Tom gave Nalin a firm handshake and Lydia a quiet nod before heading out to the barn. Reverend Morgan left before the sun dipped behind the ridge, his horse trailing a long shadow down the road. The house fell quiet again, but this time the quiet belonged to them. That night, Nalin brought her to the bunkhouse. He had swept the floorboards clean, laid out a quilt sewn from leftover calico, and built a fire that burned low and steady. She stepped inside and looked around, taking in the wood walls hung with his saddle gear, the single oil lamp casting soft gold across the room. You made it a home, she said. I waited until I knew it'd be ours, he said. She stepped out of her shoes and crossed to where he stood. She ran her fingers along the buttons of his shirt, slow and light, and looked up at him with the kind of certainty born from weathering storms. My name's Lydia Ashford now, she said. He touched her cheek with the back of his fingers, his breath catching just slightly. Yes, it is. They undressed without words, not shy, not rushed, just quiet and with purpose, like two people who had chosen each other without condition. When he kissed her, it was a promise deepened, not made for the first time but made deeper through everything that had come before. Their bodies met like roots finding soil, and when she whispered his name, it was not fragile. After they lay beneath the quilt, her head tucked beneath his chin, his hand resting where her waist met her hip. Outside, the wind moved soft through the cottonwoods, and the night held no fear. In the weeks that followed, they stayed put. Mrs. Dahl offered them the bunkhouse as their own, and Nalin added a second cot, pushed against the first to make space for her sewing basket and the small shelf he built from scrap wood. Lydia took to keeping hens and started drying herbs in bunches above the stove. Nalin carved spoons from aspen and fashioned a cradle from pine. Though neither of them spoke of it aloud until the morning, she woke before dawn and pressed his hand to her stomach. I think it's time we planned for more than just the two of us, she said. He didn't smile. He only touched her temple with his lips and said, Then we will. Their days found rhythm. Nalin worked the herds through fall, and when the snow came, he trapped rabbit and fox for trade. Lydia spun wool with Mrs. Dahl and mended gloves for Tom when he tore them hauling hay. They wrote no letters and received none. The world beyond the valley kept turning, but it did not pull at them. In early spring, after the last frost melted from the creek bed, Lydia gave birth in the main house with Mrs. Dahl's hands steady at her back and Nalin's voice in her ear. The child was a girl, strong, lunged, and dark-haired, and they named her Clara after Nalin's mother. Nalin carved her name into the cradle rail with the tip of his knife. That summer, they planted a small patch of vegetables behind the bunkhouse. Lydia taught Nalin how to thread a needle when his shirt split at the shoulder, and he taught her how to hold a rifle steady for coyotes. They spoke little of the past. It no longer asked for their attention. One evening, as the last of the sun slipped behind the ridge and Clara slept in her cradle, Lydia stood barefoot on the porch, holding a mug of warm milk sweetened with honey. Nalin came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You ever wonder why it all happened the way it did?" she asked. "No," he said. "Only that it brought you to me." She leaned back against him, her hands resting over his. "We made a life," she said. "We did," he said. And they stood there a long while, watching the sky fade from gold to blue, the air still and full of the kind of peace that only comes when every road has led exactly where it should.